Picture it, a deep, silent desert night in Makkah. The kind of profound silence where the wind itself just seems to hold its breath. Welcome to This Explainer, where today we're unpacking an extraordinary historical event. It's a story that beautifully bridges the sheer awe of the natural world with the absolute certainty of divine intervention. We're talking about unmatched physical power and just how easily that power can be completely dismantled.
So paint this scene in your mind. The people of Makkah are fast asleep. We're in the 6th century here, right? So there are no alarms, no early warning systems. It's just the vast, quiet expanse of the Arabian Peninsula. But this heavy silence, it's really just the calm before an unprecedented storm.
Because far away, right on the edge of the horizon, something is moving. If you were standing up on the hills overlooking that desert, you'd see it. This unmistakable, terrifying glint of armor shining under the moonlight. An entire military expedition is marching through the sands, bringing a kind of threat the locals had literally never witnessed before. And at the very front of this heavily armored force, a creature of just unimaginable scale to the Arabs of that era, a massive war elephant. And their target isn't some rival king, and it's not a wealthy trading city. No, their target is the spiritual center of Arabia itself, the house of God, the Kaaba. What happens next is honestly one of the most defining events in human history. It was so monumental that Allah revealed an entire chapter in the Qur'an to memorialize it, asking all of humanity a very profound question. Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with the companions of the elephant?
Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, Abraha's march and the real motivation behind this threat.
To really understand this massive invasion, we have to look at the man leading the charge. This is Abraha al-Ashram, the 6th century governor of Yemen under the Abyssinian Empire. And his whole motivation basically boils down to escalating jealousy. He wanted ultimate political and religious influence, so he goes and builds this magnificent cathedral in Sana'a called Al-Khalais. He totally expected the Arabs to drop their ancient pilgrimages and flock to his new architectural marvel instead. But they didn't. The Kaaba remained the beating spiritual heart of Arabia. Enraged by this, Abraha mobilizes his terrifying war elephants with one devastating goal: march to Makkah and tear the Kaaba to the ground. Which brings up a really fascinating question. When you picture this approaching army, exactly how many of these giant beasts do you imagine charging through the desert? Was it a massive herd or just a few? There's actually a really interesting distinction here between historical guesswork and divine certainty. Historians love to try and pin down the exact details, right? Some say there was just one elephant, others claim 8, 12, or even 13. But the Qur'an takes a deliberately different approach. It doesn't give us a head count. It simply refers to them as the companions of the elephant. So academically speaking, the presence of the elephants is absolute fact, but the exact number, that remains a bit of a mystery. So the crucial point here is separating popular lore from strict theological truth. If you grew up hearing this story, you've almost certainly heard about a lead elephant named Mahmud, who stubbornly refused to march toward the Kaaba, no matter how hard he was beaten. Now, while that is a famous, incredibly dramatic story found in later tafsir and historical literature, it's actually not found in the authentic Sahih Hadith collections. What is definitively confirmed by revelation is simply this: the event happened. Allah protected the Kaaba, and that massive army utterly failed. But we do know that the cultural memory of this event ran incredibly deep. Fast forward years later, during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ own camel suddenly sits down and absolutely refuses to move toward Mecca. When his companions assumed the camel was just being stubborn, the Prophet beautifully connected the two moments. He said, "She has not become stubborn. She has been restrained by the one who restrained the elephant." The memory of that divine protection was just woven into the very fabric of Arabian consciousness.
All right, let's shift gears for a second. Part 2, a biological masterpiece. Let's really understand the scale of this beast. To truly appreciate the miracle that defeated this army, we have to look closely at the weapon Abraha brought with him. Let's look at the science for a moment. 40,000 plus. I want that staggering number to really sink in. That is the estimated number of individual muscles contained entirely within just an elephant's trunk.
And to put that into perspective, it brilliantly illustrates just how wildly outmatched the human defenders of Makkah would have been. Think about it. The entire human body, every single muscle in your arms, legs, back, face, that totals around 600. The elephant's trunk alone has over 40,000. It is quite literally one of the most advanced, complex, and powerful biological tools on planet Earth.
Because of all those thousands of muscles, the trunk is this insane marvel of both brute force and delicate precision. It can smash through solid objects and lift incredibly heavy objects, but then turn around and use fine motor skills to gently pick up a single fragile leaf. It can smell water from kilometers away. Imagine an entire army marching behind a creature wielding that kind of biological technology. But they aren't just all brawn. Here's another crazy number for you, 5. That is 5 kilograms, and it represents the immense weight of the elephant's brain, the largest brain of any land animal, period. And that massive brain gives them some seriously extraordinary cognitive abilities. Research proves elephants are among the very few animals that can actually recognize themselves in a mirror. They solve complex, multi-step problems. And you know that old saying about an elephant never forgetting? Well, it's true. They can remember specific locations, faces, and routes for literally decades. So, with all of this physical power and immense intelligence, you'd probably assume the biggest, most aggressive male elephant is the one in charge, right? But let me ask you, who do you think really leads the mighty herd?
The answer actually defies a lot of standard assumptions about the animal kingdom. The herd is led by a matriarch, an older female whose authority doesn't come from physical dominance or aggression at all, but from her memory. The survival of the entire family depends on her ability to remember hidden water sources during a drought, safe migration routes, and historical danger zones. In fact, adult males usually leave the herd entirely.
And because of this high intelligence, they form these incredibly deep, profound social bonds. Field studies have watched elephants exhibit what scientists can only describe as grief-like behavior. They'll stand silently over the bones of fallen elephants, gently touching them with those powerful trunks, and even returning to specific burial sites years later. These are definitely not unthinking beasts. They are highly conscious, deeply social marvels of nature. Okay, let's bring it all together for our final section. The sky opens and the true meaning of power. So take all of that biological awe we just talked about, the 40,000 muscles, the huge brain, the sheer towering mass of these animals, and let's move to the climax. This is where the greatest physical force on Earth meets the command of the heavens. Abraha's supposedly unstoppable army is right at the gates, but the Qur'an paints a swift, absolutely decisive picture. First, the sky darkens, not with storm clouds, but with sudden, massive flocks of birds. Second, these tiny birds strike the heavily armored soldiers and the massive elephants with nothing more than tiny stones of baked clay. And third, instantaneous devastation. The unstoppable military machine is utterly annihilated, described so vividly in Surah Al-Fil as being left like eaten straw. The thematic contrast here is just staggering, isn't it? On one side, you have human arrogance at its absolute peak, a powerful king driven by jealousy, backed by an invincible army, and the most fearsome, biologically advanced giants of the animal kingdom. And on the other side, small birds carrying little pebbles. In the arithmetic of the world, the side of the king wins every single time. But as you can see, this is not a story about worldly arithmetic.
The real takeaway from this explainer, and honestly the entirety of Surah Al-Fil, is one definitive lesson. This isn't just a historical recount of an army failing to conquer a city. It is a profound, undeniable demonstration that ultimate power is never measured in physical size, military strength, or worldly influence. True, absolute power rests entirely in the command of Allah. Today, elephants still rightly amaze us with their intelligence, their emotional depths, and their sheer physical grandeur. But they also serve as a timeless reminder for us. If the greatest, most unstoppable forces of nature and human empire can be instantly humbled by the smallest of birds on divine command, well, what does that say about the obstacles in our own lives? Will we remember the lesson of the elephant? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable history with us today. Take that thought with you and keep learning.